So let's talk about something a lot of us have been through: learning English. The story of how we teach it has changed. I mean, it's changed dramatically over the years. It's a journey that takes us from memorizing endless rules in a book to, actually trying to have a real life conversation. We're going to dig into how we got from point A to point B.
You've probably seen this before, right? Maybe you even know someone, or hey, maybe it's you, who can absolutely crush a grammar exam, get a perfect score, but then freezes up when they have to do something simple like order a coffee in English. Well, that exact problem, that's the puzzle that generations of teachers and language experts have been trying to solve.
And all those attempts to solve it, they've given us this really fascinating timeline. We're going to walk through these 5 major methods, starting with the super old school way and moving all the way up to what we see in classrooms today. Think of each one as a different answer to that coffee ordering problem.
All right, first up, the original, the big one, the grammar translation method. Now you gotta remember, this method came from a totally different time. The goal wasn't to chat with tourists on vacation, it was all about being able to read classic literature in languages like Latin and ancient Greek.
So, what did that look like in the classroom? Well, pretty much everything revolved around 2 activities: memorizing grammar rules and translating sentences word for word back and forth between languages. The whole idea was that it was a great mental workout and it would let you read important books. Actually speaking the language, yeah, that wasn't really on the agenda.
And this slide, this really just lays the power dynamic right out there. The teacher, they are the absolute authority. They have all the knowledge. And the student's job? Just sit there and absorb it all. It was a completely top-down system. Information flowed in one direction and one direction only.
Now look, this method wasn't all bad. It was pretty easy to manage with a huge class, and it for sure gave students a strong grammar foundation. But it had a huge flaw. It created students who could diagram a sentence perfectly but couldn't ask for directions. They had zero communicative competence, and that glaring weakness, well, it was about to spark a revolution.
So that massive failure, it basically sparked a revolution in teaching. The next wave of thinkers looked at the problem and said, okay, let's try something radical. They decided to pretty much throw out the rule book and get students to actually speak. This one phrase says it all. This was the entire philosophy of what became known as the direct method. See, the world was getting smaller. People were traveling more, doing more business internationally. They needed to talk to each other. So this method was a complete rejection of translation. The whole goal was to immerse you, to get you to connect English words directly to ideas, kind of like how a baby learns its first language. And you can see right here how dramatically the roles shifted. The classroom became a place for nonstop talking. The teacher would model the language, and the student's job was to actively imitate and use it. The main tool for this was the question and answer drill, over and over, to build those automatic, instinctual responses in English. Okay, so after that, things got a little more scientific, you could say. The structural approach was all about breaking language down into its basic building blocks, its sentence patterns and structures. The thinking was, if you could just master these core patterns through tons of repetition, you could eventually build any sentence you wanted. And this right here, this shows you the bread and butter of that approach. It's kind of like a workout for your grammar muscles. The teacher gives a model sentence, that's the stimulus. The student repeats it or changes it a little, that's the response. Then the teacher says, yep, that's right, and that's the reinforcement. It was all about building that muscle memory for correct grammar, but man, it could feel really robotic. And then someone asked a question that would change everything. What if we have this all wrong? What if the whole point of learning a language isn't to create perfect, grammatically flawless sentences, but just to connect with another human being? To be understood? That single idea, it was a massive turning point. So that question, it brings us right into the modern era of language teaching. This is where the whole purpose of language finally gets defined as communication itself. The focus moves away from just getting the form right to actually using it for its function. And that leads us to communicative language teaching, or CLT. With this method, the #1 goal is developing communicative competence. That's a fancy way of saying you know not just what to say, but how to say it, when to say it, and who you're saying it to. Suddenly, getting your message across, even if you make a few mistakes, becomes way more important than perfect grammar. This is when classrooms started doing things like role plays and acting out real-life situations. And just look at this. The roles have been completely flipped on their head from where we started.
The student is now at the center of everything, an active participant, a communicator. The teacher is no longer the sage on the stage lecturing everyone. They're now the guide on the side, helping and facilitating conversation. Now, the task-based approach, or TPA, takes that idea and pushes it one step further. With this, you're not just practicing talking for the sake of talking. The whole lesson is built around completing a real, meaningful task. You're learning English not because it's a subject in a textbook, but because you literally need it to solve a problem, plan an event, or finish a project with your classmates. And the flow of a lesson is just so logical. You can see it here. First, there's the pre-task, where the teacher sets up the goal. Then comes the task cycle, where you and your group just try your best to get it done using whatever English you've got. And here's the brilliant part. It's only after you're finished, in the post-task phase, that the teacher jumps in to focus on the specific grammar or vocabulary you needed. The language becomes a tool you use, not just a set of rules you memorize. Okay, wow. We've covered a lot of ground, from dusty old textbooks to modern interactive classrooms. So let's take a second, pull everything together, and see how all these different methods really stack up against each other. This is basically the ultimate cheat sheet. You can literally trace the entire journey we've been on in this one table. Look at the focus column. It goes from abstract grammar rules all the way down to a very concrete task completion. And check out the L1 use, how your native language is used. It goes from being essential to being completely forbidden, and then finally to being used strategically when you need it. It's a perfect picture of the evolution from theory to practice. And if you want to see the single biggest change across this entire history, this chart says it all. It's the balance of power. We start with GTM, where the teacher has almost total control. And as we move through time, you see that control slowly get handed over to the student until we get to CLT and TBA, where the goal is high learner autonomy, giving students the power and the freedom to communicate for themselves. So after going on this whole historical journey, what's the big takeaway? What does this all mean for anyone teaching or learning English right here, right now? Well, here are the most important things to remember. First, the big goal has shifted from perfect accuracy to effective fluency. Second, the teacher's role has totally changed from being the boss to being a coach. And maybe the most important lesson of all is that there's no single best method. A great teacher sees all of these approaches as different tools in a big toolkit. And that's really what it comes down to. Understanding this history gives you power. It allows teachers and learners to mix and match, to pick the right tool for the right job at the right time. So the real question isn't which method is the best. The real question is, what are you going to put in your toolkit?